Strap yourselves in, boys, because today we're covering the Anatolian parts of 1337. The newest dev diary has come out for Tinto Maps, and it is a big one, a juicy one, and an absolutely controversial one, at least from my perspective it is. We're gonna see what Pavia has to say, and then I'm gonna give my own historical tidbits. Remember that I do have a history degree, and my history thesis was on the Roman Empire from its beginnings as a small kingdom to its end in 1453, officially as what we call today the Byzantine Empire. Unofficially, it still actually lasted in Trebizond and parts of Greece for quite a few extra years, but anyway, the fall of Constantinople is seen as the actual end of the Roman Empire. Before we do read the dev diary, I want you guys to take a good look at this, and I'm gonna keep my face big because I want to point out something. You see this little thing over here? This is the city of Philadelphia. This is one of the most important little bits of Roman holdouts ever. In 1337, the city of Nicomedia, as I'm highlighting in the north, was taken by the Ottomans. There were a few other cities along the coastline, but the last remnant of the Byzantine Empire, the last one to be taken by the Ottomans, was the city of Philadelphia, trapped right now between Saruhanids, Germianids, Aydinids, and Inachids. The city of Philadelphia held out until 1390, 60 years longer than all the other holdouts, as an enclave surrounded by Turks. And the reason it surrendered is one of the saddest thing imaginable. Around the 1370s, another civil war in the Byzantine Empire erupted, and because the Palaiologos wanted to get their throne back, they officially became vassals of the Ottomans, and as such, as vassals, the co-emperors John and Manuel II offered the city of Philadelphia to the Ottomans in exchange for their help. However, the city of Philadelphia refused to give up without a fight, and as such, they had to go away. Eventually, the Ottomans consolidated their power in Anatolia, they consolidated in the Balkans, and in 1390, they besieged the city of Philadelphia. The thing that really shattered the morale in the hearts of the defenders of Philadelphia was seeing their own imperial Roman banners amongst the Ottoman banners as vassals of the Ottoman Empire. And to make things worse, the Ottoman Sultan even asked Manuel and John to be the ones that accept the surrender of the city of Philadelphia as a last way of humiliating the Romans and closing the chapter of Roman control in Anatolia. I wanted to tell you this because I feel like the city of Philadelphia is really a symbol of a bunch of strong, absolutely amazing individuals that got fucked by the government. So take what you will from this lesson, but remember that whoever you give your allegiance to, think about it before you do it. Now that I said that, give me your allegiance, motherfucker. Subscribe to the channel right now. For the glory of Rome, we need to restore it. Every subscriber is one step closer to restoring the Roman Empire, okay? Now let's get into the dev diary. I had a freaking 4 minutes monologue here. Alright, so Pavia says here, thank you for joining us on the 7th edition of Tinto Maps. I'm once again asking you for your support, or not. Back to the duty of showing a new region of the map. Cool. Love it. Love the support and the work Pavia's doing on the Tinto Maps. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing what you're doing, brother. We've been all waiting, anticipating, and I'm pretty sure half of the people were in the forums refreshing every 5 seconds to see when this one's gonna come out. He says, a beautifully divided Anatolia. The disintegration of the Sultanate of Rome in the 13th century, caused by the Mongol invasion, led to multiple Turkic beyliks grabbing power over their area. Probably the strongest in 1337 is the Ottoman one, founded by the Turkoman leader Osman Gazi, but there's some stronger contenders such as the Eretnids, the Germianids, Karamanids, which will be fighting for hegemony over the region. You might also notice that the Byzantine Empire, or whatever you might call it, still holds a few positions in Anatolia, most notably of which the city of Philadelphia. I agree. Apart from them, other interesting countries in the region are the Despotate of Trebizond, held by the Komnenoi, the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia, and of course, the country known in another IP as Hisan Kaifa. You mean in Europa Universalis? Yes. You might also notice some Genoese outposts, making them important players as well. We do have next to the Kandaranids, the outpost. We also have next to Saruhanids, Aydinids, and so on. Should be one in Cyprus as well, if I'm not mistaken. So before we go down, let's talk about the political map, okay? We've got here quite a few extra tags that we haven't seen in the previous map released by Paradox earlier, because that was obviously a work in progress. I have to say they did do their research. I don't know what sources they used, but they definitely did their research. I'm actually quite impressed with this, and I'm actually quite impressed with most of the maps in this particular dev diary. I love the map colors as well. I do like the fact that we also have the Ayyubids shown here, the last remnants, right, of as we call it, Hisinkai in EU4. And I'm glad to see that the topographic map, basically the impassable terrains, or semi-impassable, as we know, there will be ways of passing these kind of mountains. They are represented, and they do pose a sort of a strategic field in Anatolia as well, as it did historically, right? It was a little bit of a natural barrier for invading nation. Actually, why the Greeks managed to hold on to Anatolia for as long as they did, despite having multiple invaders through the years. I also want to mention that the Eretnids and the Karamanids were actually super strong in 1337. The Karamanids, I think, were way stronger than the Ottomans. The reason the Ottomans got the upper hand and the Ottomans managed to conquer all of Anatolia isn't because they started as stronger in 1337. Quite the opposite. It's because they started right next to a very weakened and disunited Byzantine Empire, as well as they had the upper hand over the Karasids. After the Ottomans took over the Karasids, they did take advantage of an earthquake that destroyed the fortifications of Gallipoli, and that was their entrance into Europe, from which they had an easy time conquering the Bulgarians, the Serbians, the Byzantines, and actually the power base that they had in Europe is what they used to unify Anatolia, and at the end of which Bayezid, the Sultan of the Ottomans, got captured and executed by Tamerlane the Great. However, they still managed to retain control over most of Anatolia, and within the early 1400s captured most of the rebellious beyliks, with the Karamanids being, I believe, the last one that they actually managed to subdue in the 1400s. Now we do have here the dynasties map mode. I'm gonna struggle a little bit with the pronunciations, but yes, this is the Osmanogulari. I'm guessing that's the thing you add at the end of a dynasty within Turkish. Same here, Karamanogulari, and so on. Slight differences here and there, but in essence, the name of the tribe or sultanate or whatever you want to call it was given by usually the first person that established it, or one of the initial people that established it, who the entire dynasty is named after. We have fixed the issue with the random dynasty names, so no more weird XXX dynasty names anymore. To spice things up, we could maybe start a Byzantine discussion. Palaiologos or Komnenos? Hey yo, what you mean, bro? What you mean, bro? Excuse me, the Palaiologos are the scumbags that made the Byzantines vassals of the Ottomans, okay? I'm sorry. Komnenos all the way, if you ask me. The dynamic location naming is not yet a thing in this region, therefore inconsistencies in their language is used. As an additional note of caution, please don't use the Aegean Islands as a reference or benchmark for comparison, as a review of them is something that we've got on our list. You may be able to see that location density in the region is gradual from denser coastal regions to bigger inland regions. And let's take an actual closer look at this. We've got here Izmit, which is basically Nicomedia, that was basically captured in April 1337. And then we have Şile and Üsküdar, which surprisingly, I mean, I get it, he already mentioned, don't take the localization too accurate, because this is basically the Turkish localization, despite these both being under Byzantine control. Same here, this should be under Byzantine control. Curious if Philadelphia, yeah, Philadelphia also is the Turkish name here. Whatever the case, I like to see the way that they did the provinces, the locations, really well done. I actually want to see the provinces now check on Byzantium. Before I do that though, let me see something in the south I'm really curious about. How is Antioch depicted? I'm down for that. And what about Al Jazeera as well? You know what, I think they actually did an amazing job here. Look at that Malatya, the way it's sandwiched between the impassable terrain. That is going to be a great spot to defend, honestly. Same in the north here. Imagine how difficult it must be to move massive armies all the way around into Trebizond. One of the reasons the Byzantines managed to hold out for so long in the Trebizond areas is frankly because it was not the easiest of terrain to get into, really. That's the exact same reason why we have Cappadocians in here, the Greek Cappadocians, and a lot of Armenians around these areas too. So this is what the provinces look like. Byzantium only has 3 locations, okay? Then we have Edirne as one of the bigger ones. Dardanelles is pretty big as well. Kocaeli is decent size, like 5 locations, right? That's not bad. And then the Ottomans start with a lot of different provinces, but they don't have any of them consolidated except Sultanonu. That's the only one that they have full control of at the start. They do have parts of Ankara, Kutakia, Hudavendigar, Bolu. Provinces we pretty much know from EU4, right guys? Then in the south, we've got the Cilician Armenian provinces here, the Tarsus, Adana, Sis, Kadirli, and so on. Trebizond, pretty standard as well. It looks like really big, but the reality is that half of these are mountains, right? These are pretty big land masses of impassable terrain. Same situation with Erzurum. But then to be fair, they actually do have quite a few extra locations compared to the eastern parts, don't they? And again, I said eastern parts, but I meant western. You get what I'm saying, right? He mentions that one change they did is they changed the coloring of provinces to make them more different, easier to understand. That's great because that was an issue with previous regions. So I hope that change was done to all the regions, not just Anatolia. This is the terrain here. We've got continental, Mediterranean, cold, arid, so fairly cool in the center. And then as you go away from the center, you've got more warm weather, better suited for growing olive trees. Am I right, my olive tree enjoyers? Do we have any in the here? I got an olive tree. It's a beautiful olive tree that I hope is gonna survive till next year. First time I'm growing it, okay? And I'm growing in Japan, so it's not the most suitable climate for olive tree. There is a lot of hills, mountains, plateaus, very little flatlands, usually around the coastline here, at least in the Anatolian parts, with flatlands obviously and deserts, I'm assuming, or at least sparse as they call it, right? Like a type of steppe type terrain, I guess, in Syria, whilst the Byzantine Balkan parts are flatlands. And then we have sparse as well in the middle, which is sparse, plateau, cold, arid. That is perfect for horsemen, massively perfect for horsemen if they get a bonus that I believe they will, right? Then we do have a lot of woods and forests. That is pretty accurate. Even today, there's a lot of woods and forests in Turkey. Pavia says the terrain in Anatolia is quite interesting and unique as it's composed of very different features. The central Anatolian plateau with a colder climate and more sparse vegetation, very true, as opposed to the rugged, more forested coastlines to the north and south, while only having fluvial flatlands to the west. And in Cilicia, an area that always has been a choke point between Anatolia and Syria, and to the east, the territory is becoming increasingly more mountainous as it approaches the Caucasus. Very accurate, very accurate. The Cilician parts are known for being choke points and areas where massive battles or maneuvering has happened in history, starting with Alexander's armies all the way to 1300s Ottomans, Mamelukes, and so on, right? Or better yet, Turks, Mongols, and so on. I think this is probably going to cause a lot of forum threads on this particular topic. Oh my god, this is going to cause a lot of issues. However, here's my take on this before I even read anything. I do think this is actually very, very accurate. The 1300s was the process in which the Turks predominantly had majority of the central part of Anatolia. The coastline was predominantly Greek. The east had a lot of Armenians. The north had a lot of Pontic Greeks. We had some Cappadocians in the center as well around this particular area, and a few other cultures here and there. I'm going to talk about it more in depth, but first let's see what Pavia has to say. Mentions that Anatolia is the first region of the Middle East with cultural and religious minorities added just in time for this Tinto map. So we have an endless discussion about the divide between Greek and Turkish culture. Hooray! Now seriously, we made what we think is the most accurate division of 1337 given the scarcity of data. I agree with that. Like, you could say that it was like this or that. Reality is that we don't have extremely accurate information about this period. We do have people quoting older sources. Obviously, that's how history works in their particular books, but there's no actual numbers that you would be getting that would be accurate, that wouldn't be contradicted by other numbers that one says this, one says that. So reality is you have to go somewhere in the middle to find the truth, where you have the Turkish numbers, you have the Greek numbers, and you probably get the right amount in the middle, right? The stripes point to a variation of the pop percentage in each location from, let's say, 70% Greeks in Izmit and Bursa, 80% Turks in Ankara and Konya. We have also added some subdivisions of these cultures with the Cappadocian and Pontic Greeks and the Turkomans. You might note a majority of them around Sivas and Malatya. The Turkomans right over here and here. I'm gonna make this map bigger in a second. The Turkomans basically were like the nomadic Turks, still Turkish people. It wasn't any difference. It's just like more a different way of life than anything else. That portray more of a class social grouping divide than an ethnic language divide. That is true, yeah. As these Turkomans people were always tribesmen, yeah, and whilst we consider the settled population of Turkish. Other than that, we have a good amount of Armenian distributed between the Cilician areas and Armenia. Last people to the north and Kurds to the east, the brownish greenish culture, so these areas here. Please ignore the chunks of Syria that appear as the minorities there have not yet been done. All right, so let's actually analyze this a little bit then. So we've got over here, in starting with the Balkans, we've got obviously only Greeks, because at this particular period of time, the Ottomans, the Turks in general, did not make their way into the Balkans, so that's accurate. We've got a little bit of branching out between what I would assume is Bulgarians, Serbians, and Greeks over here, so that's again accurate. Then the coastline of the west, we do know from obviously a lot of sources that they were majority Greek, and they stayed majority Greek until the 19th century when the Ottomans started to try and massively change that, if you know what I mean, all around Anatolia for that matter. And I know that a lot of Turkish people are going to disagree, and they're going to quote their own Turkish sources, and they're going to try and make it seem like it was not like that, but it was like that. it really was like that. In fact, I have a book, The Decline of Medieval Hellenism in Asia Minor and the Process of Islamization from the 11th through 15th century, exactly talks about this particular topic. This is from Speros Vrionis Jr., and it is the 1971 edition from the University of California Press. And I mentioned this book in particular because there was a post by Kaspar Osraige, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, where he says early feedback for the map of Anatolia, and he tells us how he's gone through that particular book alongside other Turkish books and what he thinks the cultural and religious makeup of Anatolia should be. He has a very long post. I encourage you guys to read through it. However, he gives out some things here, and he mentions that this was from this book. That's funny because I actually studied this book in university and I still have it. Now, he mostly cites Turkish History Association, which is in the Western world known for being extremely political and not accurate from a historical perspective at all, including what he puts over here. And then after, he says that the famous Greek-American Byzantinist Speros Vrionis wrote an entire gigantic, humongous book about the transition of Anatolia from Greek to Turkish. Yes, he did. And then he starts explaining every part of that. However, what he explains, sure, he did read the book, and I'm glad to see that. Always happy to see fellow historians, and I'm really glad to see this post. This actually kept me entertained for quite a few hours. But this is not what the book says. This is what the Turkish Historical Association says, because the book itself doesn't have that. Maybe I didn't read it. Maybe it's a different version of the book. I don't know. But tell you what, I'm gonna make a Google Drive, and I'll put my book in the Google Drive for anyone that's interested. You could read it yourself. I'll leave it on my Discord channel, so you join the Discord and you can get the book for yourself, and you tell me your opinion, because I'm torn here. I don't know. Maybe we didn't read the same book here. Don't get me wrong. He does say a lot of truths, but in between the truths, he kind of just bends it a lot, so it seems like there's way more Turks than there actually were. And this is the map that he proposes, which is highly inaccurate. I mean, brother. Vrionis mentions specifically that the west coast was predominantly Greek in the 1300s, and that means the entire west coast, not just a few cities along the west coast, which is what you're depicting over here. This is exactly what the Turkish History Association is saying, not Vrionis, and this is really, really not accurate. If it was like this, you have another 700 years in which these small pockets would completely disappear, which was not the case, because we have historical records for these 700 years in which a lot of these areas were still predominantly non-Turkish up until the 1900s, right? And then he also puts a few pockets of Catalans. I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous, because sure, we all know about the Catalans that did come into Anatolia, the Aragonese that had some issues with the Byzantines and so on, but they wouldn't be even shown on the map compared to the amount of Greeks that you have. Now back to the map at hand. I have to say that one thing I kind of agree with Kaspar is that there were not that many Armenians in here. There were Armenians for sure, not like he says that there's no freaking Armenians in between. That's not true at all. They were definitely a lot more mixed with other ethnicities, because this area is basically where majority of the Turks flooded through. So you'd have a mixture of Turks, Kurds, Armenians, Turkomans, Greeks, and everything else in between. You would have even some Cappadocian Greeks would probably be all the way up until here, but that would be like 2-3% probably at this point in history. So definitely not represented. I'm not sure what would be the majority, so maybe it's 20% Armenian and we just see it as the majority because there's a lot of smaller different ethnic groups, which is why I don't know what to tell you about this, because end of the day, we don't have the complete makeup of these regions. We just have the highest concentration of a specific culture and then the second highest concentration as the hashed bits, right? That's pretty much it from what I understand. What is very, very accurate though is that the central part of Anatolia was the core area of Turkish control. When the Turks settled into Anatolia, they did settle into the plateau around central Anatolia, which was easier for them. They were initially obviously Turkomans, all of them. They were obviously horseback people, and having that plateau in the middle was easy for them to establish themselves, and then from there to raid all the other coastlines and raid everything else around, whilst they left alone the mountains, not so much populated the mountains, not so much populated the coastlines, which were strongholds of the Greeks altogether. Another reason why the Turks managed to get a hold of the central part of Anatolia really easily is because central Anatolia, which is going to come a little bit as a surprise, was not entirely Greek when the Turks arrived. So the central part of Anatolia was half Greek, the other half was a variety of other people that were there from before the Greeks arrived, that Greekified themselves with time, not entirely. And from what we know, it was easier for the Turks to basically just assimilate those people than it was to assimilate assimilate the coastlines and the Greek areas, which obviously had a higher degree of consciousness compared to the central parts, which were basically just peasants, majority of them, with very little strongholds, very little fortresses, or cities even for that matter, which basically gave the way for the Turks when they did settle, and because they had higher numbers as a population, to establish cities that were full-on Turkish cities compared to pretty much not that many from before. There were, but not that many, just pointing that out. The religion pretty much just follows the culture end of the day, with the Greeks being Orthodox, the Turks being Sunni, the Turkomans also being Sunni, and then we have the Miaphysites, which is the Coptic Armenians. The main difference between Miaphysites and the Chalcedonian religions, Chalcedonians being the Orthodox Christians and the Catholic Christians, and the Miaphysites being the Miaphysites, the Copts, different versions, because Miaphysitism was a doctrine that was followed by the Armenians, by the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, and so on, right? The idea was Miaphysites believed that Jesus Christ was 100% divinity, and the Chalcedonians, namely Orthodox and Catholics, believed that Jesus Christ was half divinity, half human, and that led to a complete divide into a religion, which is wild, but it is what it is. Now, here's my gripe here. I understand from Pavia that this is not finalized, right? I don't know what to tell you here, but the reality is that there was not that many Nestorians in Syria in this particular time period. There were definitely Christians in this period, but not that many, unless this is just really, really low population areas. Maybe that could be the reason. I would say maybe there were like 30, 35, 37% of the Syrian areas. You would probably have a good blend of Miaphysite Copts with Nestorians, and even some Catholics, and even some Orthodox, because the Christian population was basically a mixture of former Imperial Byzantine Authority remnants, which obviously long stopped being remnants. You also had some remnants of the Catholic Crusaders. You had some remnants of Miaphysite Armenians that also converted some Syriacs, and the Nestorians, and so on. So it would be a blend of everything. There's even in Lebanon a unique Christian religion. I forgot what it's called now, something with an M, that again should be around this area too. But the majority, of course, 70%, 65 to 70% would be Sunni Islam in Syria at least. Also, a little bit of a cute thing here. What is this, boys? What the schnapps is this, boys? Looks a little bit like Miaphysites, doesn't it? Begs the question, was ist das? Now, the raw materials map mode, as you would expected, we have a lot of everything. We have a buttload of lumber because there's a lot of forests and woods in Anatolia. We've got wheat, we've got olives, just like I have in my backyard. Legumes everywhere, livestock, especially in the central we have livestock because the Turks, when they arrived into Anatolia, they were a nomadic tribe, and as with all nomadic tribes, they survived on livestock, and that tradition carried on with the Turk settlers initially having predominantly livestock as a main source of food and everything else that they needed for, right? Then we got wool as well because that's again sheep and cattle, something that the nomads had. We got fish obviously on the coastline, fruit and so on. We got silk in quite a few places, which is really good because silk, I'm assuming, is going to be in very high demand in EU5. There's not many places that produce silk within the map itself, remember that. We got a lot of clay, spices, sand a little bit here and there, horses, medicine, quite a few. Copper, only one from what I can tell. No, two. There's another copper over here, so that's not much copper. Another thing that I noticed is missing is salt pepper. We only have one in Kairamanids, and oh, I just noticed there's one more copper in the north as well. So yeah, only one salt pepper. So whenever you reach the gunpowder age, what's going to happen then? You're going to need to make sure you have the Karamanid lands if you're playing in Anatolia, basically, won't you? Constantinople, unsurprisingly, produces silk. It was known as a main source of silk production during the Middle Ages, so that's very accurate. A lot of traders traded silk from Constantinople into the rest of Europe. And then we have, of course, some stone and some other minerals around the mountainous areas in the eastern parts of Anatolia, alongside some tin, some iron over here in the north as well, iron, 3 iron veins over there, another iron vein actually close to Constantinople, a part of the Byzantine Empire at the start, so that's cool. And beautiful little Philadelphia also has silk. I'm actually curious if they're gonna make it so you get some sort of event where Philadelphia basically becomes a city-state unto itself, because technically for about 60 years Philadelphia did manage itself, so it would be very accurate in my opinion. Market-wise, we've got 3 markets: Trebizond, Damascus, Constantinople, and I'm seeing a little bit over here, but I'm not sure what exactly it is. Then population wise, oh, this is insane. Okay, so we got 1.2 million in the Byzantine Empire, 300,000 with 700,000 in the Ottomans and the Karasids, which are basically going to be the first area that the Ottomans are going to be taken, obviously. So that basically means the Ottomans and the Byzantines have a roughly around the same amount of soldiers whenever they're going to come hand in hand. Well, technically, the Ottomans should start at war with the Byzantines. I hope they represent that. So let's see how that's going to go, because then the Byzantines have twice the amount of population as the Ottomans, but the Ottomans definitely will have the upper hand in it, if I'm not mistaken. And the other bigger Beyliks would be the Karamanids with 400,000, Germian with 400 as well, and we got 900 in Eretna, 500 here as well. Oh wow, this is very juicy. Trebizond only down to 300,000. Then we got some other Beyliks here with roughly around the same, and 350 in Chandar in the north. And we also see the population of Genoa, 544,000, as we see it in their little holdouts here, 1, 2 over here as well. The Armenians in the south, well, not the Armenians, the Turks that control of the Armenian lands also have 220,000. Pavia says Byzantium has the edge over the Beyliks, but not if they ally with each other or if they ally with its Balkan rivals. And I heard about a 66k Ayyubid challenge. Oh god. Oh yes, they do have 66,000. That's so small. They're gonna upload the French feedback results by the end of next week or at the start of the following one. In the meantime, we'll also be reading and answering your feedback about Anatolia. Next week, we'll see Russia. Oh, that is gonna be a juicy one as well. Holy snap. Had a flight delayed today. No worries, man. We appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. He mentioned there's only one Kurdish culture. I mean, that should be accurate, right? Our aim is to have the religions present in 1337. Okay, so there's gonna be no Hellenics in Greece, which would be accurate. By 1337, there would be no Hellenic at all. Oh, don't tell me that. No, the Ottomans start at peace with the Byzantines? My brother, they literally just took Nicomedia a month, no, not even a few days before the game starts, right? It starts in April 1337. So what? Okay, all right. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of weird to me. They should start at war, unless war functions a little bit different than E4 and I don't understand it. Then I guess I think most people. I want to know what you guys think about this. Let me know in the comments. Do you want them to start at war? Do you want them to start at peace? Because reality is, if they started war, the Byzantines might struggle with it, because I'm not sure they would take back their lands in Anatolia, and they probably will lose what they start with in Anatolia, to be fair, before the war is over. So keep that in mind as well. I personally think that it's better to keep it historically accurate and maybe do an event to end the war or something of the sorts even, right? We want to have Yazidi religion represented, although it's not yet implemented in the game. Okay, interesting. So the Kurds are going to be Yazidis. Oh wow. Our aim is that the Ottomans usually are the regional winners and kill the Byzantines. Sorry, but we don't have a set outcome percentage at the moment. Okay, so I'm guessing they haven't done that many games with the current version of the game to see what happens. Who will be the most powerful nation at the start? Ottomans like EU4? Who even asked that, bro? Of course it's not the Ottomans. It's Yuan, obviously. You guys should watch my Great Powers in 1337 video. I'll link that in the description. So apparently the Turkish Beyliks will have a different succession law. Ooh, very interesting. Different from the Ottomans. Ooh. Or different like the Ottomans. I'm not sure. Any kind of international organization or situation in the region? Yes. Okay. Can you tell us the name of it? The Rise of the Turks is going to be the situation. Oh, so we do get flavor to make the Turks overpowered. Will the Genoese city of Galata be represented? And he says yes. And will it have a lot of autonomy? And he says no. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and check the top great powers in EU5 right below.